So how many of your institutions are petrified of failure or change? Yeah. I recently went to a week conference on change management, and one of the main takeaways was that 85% of all projects fail. When I asked how you regroup and stand up after failure, you could hear the crickets in the room. So how do we minimize and leave room for failure and still achieve success? So I'm Shelby Queen. I'm the Director of Shared Services at the Holocaust Memorial Museum. I've been there for 13 years, and I lead a team of gift processors, quality control and data hygiene wizards, customer service and internal and external client management experts, and analysts in business intelligence and onboarding integrations for major platforms. And I have a background in inner city education, so very little scares me.
I'm Sarah Chernak. I'm the lead CRM analyst. I work for Shelby. And in shared services, I oversee the reporting, business intelligence, and analytics. I've been working with the museum for 9 years and working in Tableau for about 5. As part of the museum's adaptation of Agile methodology, we've been building a standing interdepartmental data team. So that includes all our data people and our Tableau publishers, so that we can task out project assignments, share data, documentation, best practices, and standards. All the work we're showing here tonight is the output of that team.
So our agenda is pretty simple. Who are we? The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. How do we use data? What we're doing with Agile project methodology and rapid prototyping. How we've done it, specific examples of successes and failures, because you should learn from those too. And all that we've learned. So why are 2 individuals from the museum at a data conference talking to you about our lessons learned? Hopefully because what we've been through and what we've achieved you can take back with you and lessons learned, because it all comes down to people, data, and what motivates teams to find creative solutions and be willing to change the status quo. Because truth seen through data visualizations is an incredible motivator, for good or bad. So last year, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum celebrated its 25th anniversary. It's a living memorial to the Holocaust and seeks to inspire citizens and leaders worldwide to confront hatred, prevent genocide, and promote human dignity. We are located on the National Mall and seek to provide powerful lessons in the fragility of freedom, the myth of progress, and the need for vigilance in preserving democratic values. With unique power and authenticity, the museum teaches millions of people each year about the dangers of unchecked hatred and the need to prevent genocide. We also encourage them to act, cultivate a sense of moral responsibility so that they will be responsible to the monumental challenges that confront the world. But, we're on the operations side. So how do we go about supporting the mission, which seems so all-encompassing to achieve? And we do that by using tools like Tableau. So we support the mission with its all-important work through fundraising, relationship building, strategic goal tracking with advanced business intelligence and analytics supported by Tableau and lots of other tools that we'll talk about.
So for an institution our size and age and sector, we have a lot of data. We have around 111 million historical artifacts. We've had around 45 million visitors over the 26 years we've been opened. We don't have data on all of them because we're a free and public museum, but we do have data on a substantial portion. We've taught around 1,000 teacher fellows, and teacher fellows are teachers who teach teachers and other educators how to teach about the Holocaust. Got it, right?
Yeah.
All right. We've trained around 220,000 professionals, that's judges, military, police, government officials, in Holocaust studies and genocide prevention. We have about 500 staff in 8 locations, including one here on the West Coast in LA. We have, at any given time, around 160,000 members, and we've had 5.9 million transactions over the 40 years we've been taking donations from 950,000 unique donors. We get around 19.5 million annual visitors to the website, and that's constantly growing. And we have around 800,000 social media followers on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we have around 340,000 email subscribers. So the data is pretty large scale, and it's very diverse. And that data comes from a lot of different places. Last count, we have around 90 different databases or data stores. On the screen, you can see a small sample of the places that data is acquired or stored. Like our data, our databases are pretty diverse in ease of access and use, the type of information they contain, and in their quality and comprehensiveness.
So who are our data consumers? We have a C-suite. We have a presidentially appointed council of 55 members. Obviously, we have operations management, educators and researchers, marketers, fundraisers, and operations. And within our program departments, we have huge teams working to teach, produce new scholarship every day, prevent genocide, that's a big one, and continue to grow and enrich our collections. So how do we meet their needs? How do we meet their data needs? We needed to form a new division. So we built shared services, and it really is the coming together of staff, technology, and data.
The vision of shared services is to transform the museum's relationship with our diverse constituents, our donors, members, program partners, and others, to deepen their engagement in order to advance the museum's mission. So we were built 4 years ago to collect, manage, integrate, and analyze internal and external data to help drive this vision.
So we're relatively new, but we're growing quickly in personnel, tasks, clients, and abilities. And really, the first 2 years was moving from a static donor database to an enriched constituent relationship management system with high-end analytics, primarily around fundraising and mass solicitation. Our colleagues Lisa Evans and Russ Phillips presented 2 years ago here at the conference, highlighting their advancements in prospect management and project management. And then this year, we actually incorporated Tableau in building individual portfolios for our fundraisers to set them up. We're on the federal fiscal year, so we just started our new year on October 1. So in the last year, we've really concentrated on building our data integrations, skill sets to support institution-wide strategic goal tracking and supporting holistic data quality. Our software platforms and growing our business intelligence and analytics. So easy stuff, no big deal.
So what that comes down to is we're building a data-driven organization. For us, that means promoting institutional standards for data collection, encouraging interdepartmental collaboration, and utilizing quantitative research to answer institutional questions and continually question biases. So we have what we're trying to do, right? But we were still struggling with the how of implementation until we started introducing Agile project management methodology at the museum.
So how many of you start projects and get 90% of the way through, you make it shiny and beautiful, you present it to your stakeholders, and they're like, oh, that's not what I meant. Or I actually don't think it's going to work anymore, and you've spent 6 months doing it, and it's just sad for your team and you have to go back and start over. So Agile project methodology, which the museum has been using for about 3 years, but we internally have been using for a year, has just really changed the game for us. And please understand that this is not, you need to use Agile. If you want to use waterfall project management or change theory, please do, because what you're really looking for is something that's going to motivate your team to produce excellent work, that you're going to be able to really carve out the time for work together. That's a huge thing. You need to have mechanisms and tools for better communication, whether it's Trello or Slack. You just have to use something and agree to it. And you have to engage stakeholders in decision-making along the way so that you can do shippable products, and so they're invested in the final product, because they can't just sit there at the end and say, that's not what I wanted, when they made decisions all along, and we've got it documented that they were part of the decision-making tree. So Agile was our solution. And bear with us, we understand that, Agile is very complex. There are tons of resources. We're just going to give you a 360 view and of how we specifically use Agile at the museum.
So for the way we practice Agile, we're going to center around 3 central principles. First one, I'm going to give a lot of terminology first. Iterative development with continual change and a focus on constant learning. We do short sprints with deliverable products, continual approval by stakeholders. So lots of jargon, but what that essentially means is that we're constantly working on achievable small-scale projects that can be shown to the higher-ups that are invested in the outcome, our stakeholders, for approval. This allows us to be sure that we're making the right moves, that we're all on the same page, both internally as a team and with our bosses, while we move along on a project. So, principle 1. Then we also do self-organizing teams, running sprints and scrums with constant communication, scrums with the scrum master, product owner, and development team, constant communication between the team and the stakeholders, devoted work time for the developers. And what that all means is that we're having regular structured meetings, including short check-ins, scrums, a few times a week. This forces us to communicate with each other so that all members of the team are constantly aware of what's going on. And third, we concentrate on simplicity. We use a lightweight process with a focus on the work over documentation, core functionality over bells and whistles. And that's pretty much what we're talking about today, how using the principle of simplicity can get you the maximum value out of the minimum amount of work. All right, then I'm going to try to run through quickly the evolution of Agile at USHM. So we started using Agile for traditional software applications like the online calendar and the digital encyclopedia, both of which you can see on our website today. With the success of those projects, we started using it for non-software projects within particular teams, like the Americans in the Holocaust temporary exhibit, which is now at the museum if you are in DC, and the movement of our collections from its old location to the new state-of-the-art Chappelle Center. The success of those projects encouraged the institution to move more generally from waterfall project management and one-off projects to the establishment of interdepartmental Agile teams. So now we're using it for traditional style projects like change management and systems evaluation, like the projects we're going to show you tonight. It's been an internal change management revolution from waterfall to Agile style. We are still working on establishing Agile. We're constantly learning. So our current challenges include continually breaking down silos between departments, training stakeholders how to behave in Agile project management, and securing time for our teams to work even as they do their everyday jobs. So what we're going to talk about today, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. So we're going to maximize your productivity and your wins by minimizing your work.
So rapid prototyping, because we're doing a lot of process changes, we spend a lot of time working with our stakeholders for team buy-in. And we did spend a considerable amount of time teaching them about Agile and all the jargon, which they hated. But when they started seeing the outcome, it really did start to pay off. To help us along, we internalized a concept of rapid prototyping that allows us to very quickly take concepts from the idea stage and put it in front of our stakeholders for discussion and approval.
So our conception of rapid prototyping is not development. We're not building a final report or a piece of software, even usually a minimum viable product, or anything that you can actually use in the real world. What we're trying to do is show proof of concept, something that can be used to convince and spur discussion and move our projects forward.
So how to go from zero to buy-in with just a few hours of work, fail fast, fail often, but most importantly, and if many of you are from nonprofits, fail cheaply. So now we're going to take you through some of our examples. Thank you for bearing with us about who we are and Agile project methodology. We know you really care about real-life application. So first, we're going to show you how we use rapid prototyping on a major initiative to prove that a potential solution had viability and got stakeholder buy-in and understanding at the outset, rather than finding out months down the road that we didn't have buy-in. The major takeaways from this project were know your audience, what do they need to be convinced, and quick and good is much better than perfect. The first project that we're going to highlight is our fundraising optimization. We call it Fun Up. Again, stakeholders hate the cute names, but it is important because they don't forget it. We have fundraising entities in two different divisions, and we were having problems with over and under solicitation of our donor constituents. So our proposed solution for this problem was to create a unified donor assignment system that will ensure that donors are solicited by one and only one track. No matter what vehicle they're solicited by, we want to make sure that there's just one channel. So once we'd done a few sprints to understand actually where we stood and what the problems were, we were able to take our internal processes and procedure, and we were ready to come up with our optimization once we threw everything out and started all over.
So at the beginning of the sprint, the development team talked through the rough criteria for tracks, which were a new formulation of the team. Tracks are a handful of different intersecting pathways that external constituents can be tagged and moved along depending on their behavior, the information that we have on them, and our internal strategies for external communication and solicitation. What we wanted to show our stakeholders was how these tracks could be assigned and work together on an individual donor's account. So all the information feeding these tracks is available currently in our CRM and regularly used by our analysts. So we pretty much had a data source at the outset that we understood well. So we were able to jump right in and start building this dashboard. So during the sprint, the Tableau developer turned the brainstormed track criteria from the team into some calculated fields and built a dashboard to show the real-world results if a donor ID was in the data set was entered. At the end of the sprint, the project owner and the dev team presented the dashboard to the stakeholders, and in the room, we were able to answer questions quickly and show the real-world results. The stakeholders could see quickly exactly what we wanted to convey, that every constituent would live in multiple tracks, that these tracks would be assigned on some logical schema, and that those tracks could interact. We could even go into the real database, look up that constituent, and show how and why they ended up where they did. So, instant understanding. Through rapid prototyping, with around 4 hours of developer work, and over the course of just 1 2-week sprint, we were able to show the stakeholders what the tracks would look like and how they could work. This is true even if the tracks themselves would change down the line, as they did. Having this done as a rapid prototype rather than a fully functional automated system allowed us not to worry about the details. We could present before we spent a ton of time working out the minutia of how the tracks would be built and how they would work. And we didn't have to worry about investing time that would be lost later when things were fixed or expanded. So this rapid prototype resembled but did not replicate the real-world system we'd eventually build. If we had built the actual system, we probably would have spent at bare minimum 80 hours of developer time, but Tableau and rapid prototyping allowed us to save a lot of time, but still convey our concept pretty clearly. So here is another example from the same project. Last slide featured where a specific constituent would end up, but this one demonstrated to stakeholders how people in aggregate could move from one segment in a track to another. So we visualize this in 2 ways. The first one is the basic logic in Lucidchart, but then we were able to actualize that in Tableau. So we took a subset of our data from our first dashboard, those who gave in 2018, and categorized them for that first year based on the calculated fields we had developed for the first dashboard. Then using some more calculated fields and the new logic that you see in the Lucidchart, we showed where those donors would have moved based on their behavior in 2019. So this way, we were able to show our stakeholders how movement between the 2 groups of work, or the many groups of work. For example, if a donor gave a $1,000 renewal gift in year 1, and then gave $2,000 an upgraded gift in year 2, that donor would move from a $1,000 renewal solicitation track to a $2,500 upgraded solicitation track. The way we presented it in counts allowed them to see that even in our small subset, there would be a lot of significant movement between the tracks, creating a more donor-centered and customized experience. This sort of practical example, even if the actual logic would certainly change and get more complicated down the road, helped them understand the concept and agree to adoption.
So again, our takeaways. When we started the project, it was an interdisciplinary team, and we really needed to not only know our audience, our stakeholders, but we needed to know our team, because my problems that I wanted solved first were not the problems that digital engagement and membership wanted solved first. I wanted the operations fixed and less time on adjustments. But by walking through a donor journey and doing this complex mapping, we were all able to get on the same page and really understand what the priorities were and come up with the criteria that we used to critique all of our problem solving and solutioning. And it's really simple, donor-centric decision-making, optimizing operations, and at the end of the day, raising more money for the institution. So we were able to put aside our internal divisions and really come up with unbiased solutions. Our stakeholders, some of which were C-suite, needed a different journey. And while the donor map worked for them, absolutely, because we needed to create a sense of urgency and show that, we really did have some problems that we needed to fix. And while we are a successful fundraising agency, there's always areas for continuous improvement. So we needed to outline for them the specific change, and how it would affect them personally and how it would affect their teams. We needed to institute a level of urgency so that it would lead to better holistic fundraising. So before we walked into any group meeting, we met with them individually. It took a lot of time, but trust me, before we presented anything that was shocking or was going to be a huge change, we needed to get them on their own, whether it was individually or with people within their own department, and really talk through their specific concerns without anybody else from, if you add marketing in, if you're adding development in, or membership, they needed to have their own space to express their concerns, for us to answer, for them to walk through the not pretty Tableau dashboards that we built, and really come to a decision before we went to the meetings, so that when we went to the meetings, there was no surprises most of the time. We're still human. And we could move to adapting what we were doing and really coming to what's next. Quick and good.
Sorry. So we learned quick and good is often better than perfect. What this means for us on this particular project is that we really did not spend any time coding for all cases, especially the extremes, and that we didn't build out any functionality that wasn't essential for our argument. What we created for our stakeholders was only what we needed to demonstrate the concept. In the process, you want to make it clear to your stakeholders the limitations of what you're presenting. You want to be transparent and highlight how you're holding yourself accountable, but still not spend any time on something that doesn't need to be explicitly presented in order to explain your idea. So another type of project that we worked on was a basic software UI user interface demo. Tableau may not be able to replicate the full functionality you'll get from building custom software and advanced user interface, or at least not under my control. But it is great at allowing you to develop a front end that will allow users to click and manipulate data. So for projects that are dealing with interacting with data, we found that there's a great utility in demoing a UI that, unlike a lot of traditional prototyping software, you can actually have your donor, your end users, click, manipulate, and interact with.
So our takeaways from this project that we're going to talk about: resemble, don't replicate, develop only what you need, incomplete can be complete enough, and most importantly, and this is very agile, test with actual users. So we needed to upgrade our donor kiosk. It seems really simple. It's you go to an iPad, you look it up in our rooms with donor inscriptions. We had, like many of you in nonprofits, made something far more complex than it needed to be. You just needed to put in a name, figure out where the inscription was, and tell somebody how to get there. So our old system was not connected to the CRM, and it took quarterly 2 days for Sarah to do that, and her time is far better used in other things. So we had to convince our team members that connecting in a system that simply looked up donor kiosk inscriptions and connected to our CRM was incredibly valuable and would save at least 8 days a year.
So our primary concern for us in shared services was that our old data wasn't machine readable, required a ton of manual editing to be loaded into the kiosk, but it did kind of work, and it had been in use for years. So to make such a significant change, we had to demonstrate that the new way would be easy and it cleanly machine readable. Okay. And sorry, I lost my place with that blinking. Without any hand manipulation, and that if we put effort into changing to a new schema, we'd be able to have the data display how the end users wanted to see it. Something going on? I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna not touch it. We reformatted a representative subset of the data, loaded it into our standing test database. And because this was the same team that had been working with the original data, and because we entered the project with a good idea of how we wanted the new schema to operate, we were able to create the data set pretty quickly. We then built a simple UI in Tableau to show what the data might look like, and when we moved to the new kiosk. The whole process took about 2 hours of developer time. So now the actual functionality in the real-life kiosk is far more advanced than we could have done quickly in Tableau, and certainly would have taken far longer than 2 hours. But the intent was not to rebuild the kiosk. Instead, we just wanted to prove that we could create a machine-readable data set that could be automatically delivered to a new kiosk so that we could get buy-in, sign-off, and have IT then build out the full application.
So since we saved time on some production and buy-in, and they really could believe that we could have an integrated system, we actually went forward and spent some time with actual users. The museum hosts an annual Days of Remembrance, and on the night that donors were unveiling new inscriptions on the donor wall, we actually took our Tableau data set and our Tableau dashboard and had them manipulate it and work with it, and we got some great feedback. One person said, my grandkid might not know how to spell my first name 20 years from now, so we put in SoundX. Another one said, who I'm very familiar with, said, Shelby, I've got 3 of these. This is great, I can see them, but you didn't tell me where they were. You just said the panel and the line. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll add a mapping. So we took their feedback and built this. It's gonna work. It's going, oh, yay. So simple. You look up the donor, you get their inscription, you get their lines, they choose which one they want to see, and then it even has a mapping function. Now, to our stakeholders, this was like dark magic. They were like, let's use this everywhere. We're like, slow down. We have to be specific about where we're going to use this. But yes, for this specific thing, it was incredibly powerful and furthered Agile methodology in the museum.
So our takeaways for this project: resemble, don't replicate. We didn't create the full application, and we were upfront that we weren't attempting to do so, but we created a UI that was just similar enough to convey the concept. Develop only what you need. We wanted to show how the new data format would work, so we created something that would do that cleanly and clearly without any additional features. Incomplete can be complete enough. Our limited directed project was enough to show the stakeholders, subject matter experts, and even end users and donors, and get the results that we needed. Test with actual users whenever possible. So our limited small-scale rapid prototype allowed us to go out to actual end users and get that data that would be extremely valuable in improving the end product.
So our last project that we're going to highlight, that we're going to give 2 examples of, which I'm sure nobody has problems with breaking down silos. So we're going to talk about the good and the bad around breaking down silos. If you remember earlier, we said that we have 90 different substantial silos, and that's discounting all the individual Excel spreadsheets that are on hundreds of computers throughout the museum. So how do you approach the concept of integrated data system when, there's an embedded distrust? How are you going to use my data? And, I don't trust you, basically. So we needed to really start small and grow big and talk consistently about adopting a data-driven methodology and being really honest that it was a cultural change, and we were going to ask them to change how they do business on a daily basis. So our takeaways for this mostly were know your audience and what can't they do now but they really want to do, and build trust. State your limitations up front and put them to the side and move on, but be upfront about it.
So the question we have, I'm sure you guys have, data is everywhere, it's ubiquitous, right? But how do you get it?
So our first group that we worked with was our collections team. We wanted to acquire their data. How do we get their buy-in? How do we get them to actually show us their data? It took a while. But our approach was that we really were going to present to each team with a demonstration of what we could do with their data if they just trust us. Now, we said that we would not place this data in the CRM, it would be a one-time use, and that whatever we built would not be shared with anybody else in the institution. We would trust their silo until we started integrating their data. So the most important thing with this project was, what do they want that they can't do? And then show them what they could do if they just trusted us and started integrating their data and talking about institutional standards for data collection, which is really boring, but it is so important. Texas versus TX, I tell you, it'll kill you.
So our collections data is kept in a separate database, which is not currently related to any other database at the museum. But the question we constantly get from our fundraisers, from our educational outreach team and other staff is, wouldn't it be useful if we could tell who donated, requested, researched, assisted, or collected items and relate it to their database that they have? So, approaching this project, we asked ourselves about the collections team. What reports are they missing now? What can we do that they can't? So we realized that the collection team has great data and display of individual items, but little to look at the overall picture. They couldn't tell you about geographical spikes and dips, where they were missing opportunities or trends by area or tag or item type. So with Tableau and temporary access to their siloed data, we were able to present this rolled up data in a way that they could easily understand and see the value in. You can see with this project, it did take substantially more time than a lot of the others we showed you so far. That was because the development team wasn't familiar with the data. In all our previous examples, you were seeing data that came from our CRM system, which our analysts work with regularly. This being a data silo breakdown project, we hadn't seen the data before, and so we had to spend a significant amount of time in data investigation before we could start building, around 6 hours. On the upside, Tableau is actually a great tool for that, and rather than poking around in an XML file and trying to guess at insights in advance, we were able to bring the data into Tableau and figure out what was going on and what we might be able to build quickly. For these types of projects, I'd encourage building a block of time to allow your developers the space to investigate the data, but not so much time they get distracted investigating all of it. It's super important to keep in mind the goal. Present the simplest and quickest dashboard that would provide clear value to the stakeholders. What we ended up presenting was quick summary data presented cleanly and concisely. We knew, because we knew our audience in the collections team, that this would be enough to win them over and start to gain cooperation, because it was something they really couldn't see before without weeks and weeks of work, and certainly not at a glance. So Tableau gave us a way to browse a new data source, reformulate it into something we could use and understand, and quickly and coherently present summary statistics, the exact sort of summary statistics that we knew the collections department would want to show their management and their donors. We were able to keep the hours of development time it took down by concentrating our efforts. We identified at the beginning of the project the minimum it would take to impress, and we limited our development effort to that. By knowing our audience and our goals with around a day's work over the course of 2 sprints, we went from raw data to having a product that was able to demonstrate how sharing data on a regular basis could be a major win for the collection staff.
And some unintended consequences, which were positive, that came into be after we submitted this was that our collections are going to hire people on the ground using our location data, which is great. And then the other one is that they're going to trust us to help clean up their data so that when we move to an integrated CRM, their data will be clean and integration will be much easier. We don't have it yet, but we can clean it up in their own system. So baby steps. Our next group that we worked with was an interdepartmental team, and it really was educators and scholars looking at who our relationships were in that area, whether through campus outreach or anything. But this group was mostly interested in how do we form relationships at the museum, how do we enrich them, and how do we keep them. So this dashboard, when we put it up, started a lot of talk in the room. They just segmented and they were like, oh, if this was, I could use this for grants, I could use this for donor reporting. I can use it to reporting for our council. And so I let them talk for a while, what filters might you want in the future, whatever. And then I pointed out that that big blue area at the bottom was all the miscellaneous people that they actually gave us when we built this dashboard. And we only have their name. We don't know what they attended. We don't know who they are to us. We just have their first and last name. And so by showing them something that basically failed, it incredibly altered how they were looking at data collection, and created the possibility of what would have happened if they had had a standard data collection, if they had an integrated CRM for all the program departments. And then, things got much easier. So visuals can be really powerful. Stakeholders understood immediately a need for change, and it created a level of urgency where there just wasn't one before.
So the takeaways from this type of data silo breakdown project is, once again, know your audience. In this case, what we specifically wanted to know was, what can't they do now? So we were able to move these projects along by knowing what the departments would love to be able to do but can't currently. Their current limitations were our opportunity for growth. And because we knew our audience, we knew their capabilities. Because of staffing, data, or technological limitations, they couldn't present quick summary reports. And in particular, while they were doing all of this actual amazing work, they couldn't quickly provide the type of reports that would allow them to show their management and their donors all the wonderful things that they're doing. And here's where, unlike in some of our earlier projects, we did want to create shinier objects that imitated final products with branding and color. We were able to leverage Tableau's capability of quickly and easily providing branded, beautiful, simple to understand dashboards. We found that these type of dashboards are impactful, particularly because of how simple they are. They allowed us to display what would be possible if the teams we were working with allowed us to partner with them in collecting, maintaining, organizing, and making available their data for reporting. Tableau is a great carrot for these types of data silo breakdown projects because it not only allows for quick and easy manipulation of the data by the developers, but it provides a platform to display to stakeholders what the future can really look like, even before you have or really truly understand all the data.
And build trust. It seems simple, but it is something that you do need to reinforce. Have conversations, boring conversations about the need for an institutional standard for data collection. I say it all the time, it's my buzzword, it's so important. Be realistic about your resources, time, staff, money. You don't ever want to be caught in a lie. Highlight incremental achievements using the Agile project methodology. It seems less daunting when you start chopping it up and you see real-time, real results fast. Understand that change is difficult for everybody. Always in the top 5 fears for human beings is change and public speaking. So we're change managers speaking publicly, so it's hitting all my fears. But our institution sometimes makes changes, that feel impossible, but especially with the Fundraising Optimization project, which we've been talking about for years needing to do, actually getting in a room, getting on the same page, and starting small 2-week sprints. What we were able to do really in 5 months is shocking, and now we have to go talk to other people in the museum about how we did it. I will say one thing, I'm the product owner on that project, and I don't directly report to any of the stakeholders. So that did help, and I could be very honest. Just gonna say. Be empathetic. Show that you understand it's difficult, but then, it's a business. So get moving and get on with it. For our future projects, our customer service expansion, we're going to demonstrate ticketing, accountability, and transparency, mainly with HR and finance. Event planning and management, real ROI on events around public programs and our anchor fundraising events. Small audience engagement, we've talked about the over and under solicitation. We really need to be directly involved in understanding our smaller constituents, whether they're survivors, our council members, we need to understand exactly what they're getting throughout the year using all of our integrated software systems. And budgeting, demonstrate the benefits and potential of a unified budgeting system. I'm sure you all don't have issues with that. So, overall,
Sum up. These are the 4 main things we've learned during these projects and that we hope you can take away with you to work on yours. Know your audience. Who specifically are you trying to convince? What, based on their role, their knowledge, their personalities, and their capabilities, will they require to be convinced? You want to define your project goals clearly. Know exactly what you want to get accomplished. Vagueness, not your friend. Break down your project to the size where you can clearly and simply articulate what you need to accomplish. And you want to build the minimum to sway your particular audience and to meet your specified goal. Be aware that the minimum is going to vary based on your goal and your audience. And if you're really directed and really focused, especially with Tableau as a tool, you don't need to spend a lot of time. Having clarity on the audience and the goals and building only what you need for those 2 things, coupled with the ease of displaying data and building simple reports and mocking up functionality in Tableau, has allowed us to move projects forward and without expanding a lot of effort on the part of the development team.
and finally, be authentic. Trust is impossible to get back once you've lost it. And really, these people have to trust you with their data. Talk about the hard parts of change management. Have the difficult conversations. It will completely be worth it. And thank you for our partners, Direct Us, for pushing us into presenting today.